I am here with, for the second time, full disclosure, Abbe Sultan, who has been kind enough to give me a little time to do an interview for Flow Flood. The first recording was a complete disaster, and so we're kind of doing another conversation. Why don't you do a little intro first of you, and then we'll talk a little.
My name's Abbe Sultan. I am the co-founder of Flow Flood. We are a flood marketplace. We're in 43 states, and we basically have 6 syndicates and the NFIP all in one platform.
43 states. That's great. What's wrong with those other 7 states? They haven't gotten on board yet.
They're a little bit harder to write in. New York, for example, requires us to suppress the application and get the stamp before we send it out, where our whole platform is all about automation and being able to auto-deliver an application. So even though it sounds like a small feat where they just suppress it if it's from New York, it actually takes a lot of programming to be able to do that. And other states like Alaska or Montana, it's just not as much in it for us right now. But we'll be in all states, sooner than later.
Well, New York is, difficult for a lot of things. It's a very hard place to get an adjuster's license. I did finally do that. You have to take a test for them. It doesn't matter where else you're licensed. They like their own thing. I literally had to go get fingerprints and put them in the mail. Like, it's a quite antiquated process. And what I've been focusing on in my career now, out of claims, is into more consulting and kind of public information about why we're not selling enough flood insurance. Obviously, the NFIP has had a big reduction in policy count in the past year, or since Risk Rating 2.0 came out, and the rates have become very challenging. I understand 6 or 8 states are already have suits filed against FEMA on that front, and the rates are one thing, but it's a historical problem. We can't get enough people to buy flood insurance, and I've done a lot of research on it. But private flood has had a huge opening since 2021 when the mortgage industry allowed you guys to be accepted for mandatory purchase requirements on mortgages, which is great. So growth has been huge in the past couple of years. So tell me a little bit about that growth.
You're absolutely right. Ever since the acceptance of private with the lenders, it's truly helped. And I think part of it is that's where private flood stemmed from. It's protecting the banks from the loans that they are making. And that's also it's a benefit. It's great that they're now accepting private, but it's also this hurdle, and that folks who feel that their properties aren't in a flood zone because my bank didn't require it are under the misconception that they have zero or very little need for flood insurance. And it goes back to education, where we as an industry as a whole have to really work together to do a better job in letting property owners know that just because you're not in a special flood hazard zone doesn't mean that you're not in a flood zone. And I wish we got rid of flood zones, because there's no such a thing as I have no exposure. Everyone's got exposure. If rain can touch your property, there's an exposure to have a flood. There could be an increased or a decreased exposure based on where you live. And as a private, we look at each property individually. We don't classify it into, well, you're in this flood zone, so you get this surcharge to start with, and then we start looking at your home characteristics. We look at the property and say, what is the probability of this home being in a flood? If it's in coastal, what are the surge risks look like? And then we price it accordingly. So when we come out and we price a property, it could be 2 properties next to each other, could have significantly different rates based on their characteristics. And I think that's what Risk Rating 2.0 is trying to solve for, but it's going to take them close to 10 years to do that.
That is a work in progress for sure. I get that the program really has needed for a long time to get their rates in order to match what risks out there. But, I just read a study about what you're talking about, which was that if the maps were redone, I don't think we should rely on them either. I agree with you. But if the maps were appropriately drawn to include rainfall flooding, to include increased, and more severe events due to climate change, they estimated that the SFHA, the special flood hazard area, would be as much as 40% larger.
I believe it. And some of these maps it's in the 70s or 80s. That was the last time they got remapped. How much has happened? How much growth has happened in these areas since those times?
I think that, I mean, you're talking about urban development and infrastructure being outdated and all these reasons that people think I'm not on the water. I'm not on a coast. I don't have hurricanes in my backyard, so I don't need flood. It's all fallacy. There's so many misconceptions that are just, it's just a shame. And you're right, education is the key. In my opinion, for my dollar, agent education is the key because
Yes.
agents have that chance right there at the point of sale, and realtors for that matter. If I could get the real estate industry to pay attention for a minute, getting people to understand that there is some risk everywhere you live, just like you said, it's so important. So some of
Yep.
those false beliefs that the people like, it's never going to happen to me. That's not true. It already happened here. Oh, the 100-year event already happened. I hate the 100-year. I mean, that phrase needs
I
to be
agree.
abolished. Another big fallacy, I think, is that FEMA will come in and give us disaster assistance. That is possibly true, but it's mostly going to be pennies on the dollar, and it's mostly going to be in the form of loans that you have to repay that you weren't
That's right.
prepared for. I guess the question is, how do we start that education? Where do we start? If I could get on national television, I would talk to anybody who would listen, but we have to do this in a grassroots
Well,
way. So, how do you guys handle it?
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Right now, it's grassroots. It's everybody we speak to. Every opportunity that we have is to educate and to let folks who are describing or being agents and letting insureds know what they need to protect, to educate them because they're ultimately our voice. Agents and brokers in our country are really going to be on the ground floor spreading the word. And they have to understand what the need for flood insurance is. In my past life, I owned an insurance agency, and we would have other insurance agencies giving us their flood insurance because they didn't know how or they didn't want to quote flood insurance. It was burdensome, and they simply just didn't want to do it. We're past that, and agents got to get past that. That you know what? It's an easy product to quote. I can quote it. Not just that, I could have an E&O claim if I don't protect it. I'm doing a disjustice to my client if I don't at least give them a proposal and let them decide, do you or do you not want to protect or go with flood insurance and cover yourself? I think flood, earthquake, fire, we all have to give these options to the clients and let the client ultimately decide.
I completely agree. And I think I've heard you say before that an agent should be offering a flood quote with every single homeowner's quote, every single
Absolutely.
one. I agree with that. I don't think, and I think that some of the
Yep.
miseducation and misinformation is with agents and not just consumers, that we'll check the map, we'll look at the zone, and if you're not in the zone, then we don't have to bother with it. When in fact, it needs to be treated like an integral part of the homeowner's package. I think that if you think of, I don't know why I thought of this the other day, but a donut, like a donut, if that's your homeowner's policy, the donut hole is the flood insurance. You need it there.
Absolutely right.
It's
No,
absolutely, I mean,
it's the number one peril, right? Well,
yeah,
why? I mean, if it wasn't important, we wouldn't be stressing it so much. And we'd say, look, kind of like earthquake, where do you live? Well, how much equity do you have in your home? But for flood, it's the number one peril, and I don't
it
think it
is.
gets enough. We see it every time there's a catastrophe. The percentage of folks that didn't have insurance, and that hurts communities. It
Yeah,
hurts the rebuilding of communities after an event. If folks have insurance, businesses have insurance. It's a lot easier to rebuild. It's a lot easier to get the communities back, which then enforce lets the businesses get back, lets the insureds go back to work, tax dollars working, and again, everything's back up in a much speedier way, fashion, and less strain on the government and resources. And I think everyone has a better experience. Look, we can't not have these events. It's not up to us. It's Mother Nature. It's climate. So how do we prevent them? We can't. But how do we mitigate them? And how do we insure against them?
and I think the problem also is that people look at flooding as a freak event, and it's not. It's well forecasted, and it's much more common than people give it credit for. I just saw a video. Somebody posted it was from Ian last year, and it was a fixed camera on looked like on a street light, and it showed the flooding start and then rise up to, yes. And my comment to that was, I think that it's unfortunate people who live 7 or 8 blocks or a mile or 5 or 15 or 25 or 100 miles inland they think, oh, that's so tragic, but it'll never happen to me. People think I'm not on the beach, so it won't happen to me. But if they showed that same camera, a quarter mile inland where it did flood, maybe people would start to understand it's really not. It's not just the beachfront properties. Inland flooding from hurricanes is. I was doing a funky little map about it. Hurricane Irene, which was 2011, came onto the North Carolina coast and flooded in 13 states. That's not beachfront. That's a quarter of the country.
We talked about the maps being, revisited, and they haven't, since the 70s or 80s. Well, and the growth, the urbanization that's happened from then when the maps were created, and there was maybe a home and then a lot and then another home. Well, now it's all cement. It's all asphalt. And when water comes, where does it go? The cities that were built didn't really think there would be this much urbanization, and the systems simply can't handle normal rain, let alone atmospheric rivers.
The maps actually consider it when you're looking at cities or urban areas like that. It's only considering riverine flooding, overflow of lakes and rivers and, bodies of water. But runoff from rainfall or pluvial flooding is not part of the current mapping structure at all. That's an entire world of flood that does not get reflected at all in the maps. And, so people who are relying on the maps, it's not, the special flood hazard area is too small. But what bothers me also about the whole mandatory purchase only in a special flood hazard area is that those rules were set 50 years ago, and we have decades of data that most, up to 40% of flooding takes place outside of the SFHA. But FEMA hasn't changed the maps even to say, or hasn't changed the mandatory purchase to push past the SFHA. Even if you can't get to the maps, at least apply the data you have, to the mandatory purchase requirements. That would be a great start. But you guys don't use maps for
and
all
Wendy,
your
you know what that will do? We don't. We definitely map where our properties are that we insure because we want to be well diversified. And that's exactly kind of what I want to piggyback to your comment is if we did extend this from the special flood hazard zone, forget the maps for right now, but if we did extend this, it does a couple things. One, it brings more individuals into the overall model of those that are insured under flood, which then brings the premium pressure down for everybody, who can then have an easier time paying those bills and purchasing flood insurance. It's all in all a positive for everyone involved, including those who are in special hazard flood zones and those who are outside of it. But it's vital that we are able to expand this. And while we expand this, look, there's going to be more competition then, more insurance companies coming into the market because now they see the diversification, and competition is always good for the insured and the consumer.
I think the market absolutely can. The market always figures it out. And then there's a learning curve. Private flood, 24 months or so since those mandatory purchase requirements have allowed the private flood to really come into a level playing field, and it's exploded in terms of volume in just that short period of time. We're just getting started. The market will figure it out, but the market is dependent on getting the right number of people into the program. You're right. And so for all the reasons we're talking about, where these, myths and fallacies need to be broken and agents need to be trained so that they understand we're not trying to sell you a bill of goods. We're trying to protect the country from something that is well known to be, it is, like you said, it's the number one peril that causes the most damage.
Right. We're talking in the United States right now with the policies that we sell, but we've seen what flooding has done worldwide. And I feel we're fortunate enough to have the NFIP, and we're fortunate enough to have these private options. It makes sense for us to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about the future a little bit, and really what excites me about private flood is the things that you offer that NFIP doesn't offer.
One of my favorite coverages, and I think that's really important, that's outside the NFIP, is loss of use. That is, to me, one of the most important things. If your home or your property gets flooded and you have to go live somewhere else while the water subsides, that's a really important coverage. And NFIP currently doesn't have that coverage. You
Yeah.
mentioned replacement costs. You're going above the 250,000. We can go up to replacement cost. Why should we not? I mean, cover it. Flood doesn't stop at 250,000 and say, okay, I've done enough damage here. Now let's move on. We've seen properties get shifted and moved, and that's a total destruction. That's a rebuild, and you have to be able to get to that replacement. We've actually seen a tick up in those replacement cost policies. I'd say in the past, maybe 10% of the folks would choose that option when it was available. Now we're starting to see 20 to 25% choose that replacement cost option.
What kind of limits do you have available in your portfolio?
We'll go up to 2 million TIV. We're working on a product that's going to allow us to go up to 5 million. Really, I think that's where we need to be with the cost of construction going up, cost of goods going up. We need to be at that higher level, especially when a catastrophe happens in a cat event. Prices of everything that are already expensive with inflation, they're going to double and triple. And we want to make sure our insureds can purchase that type of coverage.
If you could get every agent in America to write flood insurance, that would be awesome. So you really have to talk about it to get people to realize that flood is not a freak event. It is a big deal.
No.
And it's not handled appropriately in most cases. Insurance, it's pushed off like, what did I call it? The extended warranty problem. When you buy something new,
Yes.
a new electronic, you get asked, would you like to add the extended warranty? And we can't treat flood insurance like that kind of afterthought. And I feel like that's what happens. Really, we have to do something about that. So, and I don't know what I can do except to have conversations like this. So, that's why I'm here.
As an industry, the first step was make quoting flood insurance easy. Where agents, first was, I don't know how to do it and I don't want to do it. Now we've eradicated that. Flood insurance, we don't need elevation certs anymore.
Yeah.
If you have a homeowner's policy or homeowner's quote, there's only 2 or 3 other items we really need in order for you to be able to quote a flood insurance. So that's out of the way, saying I don't know and I don't want. And then the distribution, there's not enough markets out there. I don't have an appointment. We're starting to see a lot more players in the private realm. And that's no longer a barrier to entry. We don't have production requirements. So, hey, if you're in an area where you tend to write less flood, you write 5 floods a year, we'll still get you an appointment at Flow Flood. We don't have flood requirements and numbers you have to hit. It's not a number game. We simply want to be able to provide. And then we have 6 private markets with 1 input and the NFIP rate. So I don't think it's going to get any easier than where it is today. And to your point, now it's education. Why? So I know the need, and I know the how, but now the why. And we really got to get agents on board in their quoting mentality and their behaviors. It's got to be a behavior shift. In the past, auto, home, umbrella, life. Auto, home, umbrella, life. Well, it should be home, flood, auto, umbrella, life. Part of this conversation.
Yes. Tell me about the skateboards behind you.
Sure. As a kid, I was a big skateboarder. I love skateboarding. And as I grew older, I couldn't find any in my decks. But they're really, to remind me, and the driving. Look, no matter how old you get, you still got to remember when you were a kid, because as a kid, you got to be imaginative. And when you fell, you got back up. And to me, although this is my office, I want to still remember those days and continue in how I help grow our company and be imaginative as when I was a kid. So to me, I always want to skateboard. I skateboard with an electric skateboard now every day, or not every day, but as much as I can. Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's called a Boosted. And it goes about 25 to 26 miles per hour at full speed, but it could go up hills. So my wife will bike and I'll skateboard, and it'll go for about 15 to 18 minutes. So it's not very long, but it is so much fun.
It's awesome. So this is
snowboarding.
This is a reminder for you to be creative and to have fun, right? This has been so much more fun talking this time. I feel like I tried too hard before. And I really...
You got to be yourself.
I'm so grateful that you just came and, this this is more of what
Yeah.
I had hoped for. This is what I envisioned, a conversation, and I'm kind of just winging it. So,
Yeah. One thing really, what would love to do, and if you're on board, I want to get your okay first, is you do a great job at having those claims experiences and being an
yeah.
educator in flood. I'd love to in the future, and not long future, near future, put
Okay.
together where I bring my agents or create a once a month or once a quarter event webinar where it's all about education, flood education, and inviting the users. I have about 10,000 or 9,000, I can't remember, on LinkedIn, and our agency force opening up and let them sit in on whatever topic it is that we want to discuss in that month or in that quarter. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
That is like my dream job. Absolutely. I've
Awesome.
lots, I make slides all the time because I love PowerPoint. I'm always playing around with what if I could talk about this or so yes, absolutely. I would love to. We
Awesome.
can whatever event you want to put together, I'm happy to gear the topic towards, what you're trying to do. Bringing claims experience to it. There's really nothing like standing in someone's home after a flood. And having
Yep.
that kind of experience makes it real. And the reason for us
Yes.
to sell more insurance is for all the people who don't have adjusters standing in their living room after it happens. So, yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Awesome. Wendy, flood, when you're able to touch the emotions of an individual, an agent, and an insured, you're able to get your point across. And I'll never forget the flood claims that I've seen and witnessed firsthand.
Yeah.
The the worst day in someone's life, and you're standing there next to them, and they've lost everything they've worked for, and they
Yeah.
have no idea what the next day is going to hold for them. When you have those moments, and you have an insure and someone who's got insurance versus someone who doesn't, and you see the difference, and you know as an agent that, hey, if I do a little bit more, I could have this other outcome where they're able. It's not a great day; they still lost everything, but at least there is a path back. It
Yes.
I and this is my industry, and I'm an agent. I have to do this. I can't rest at night if I don't. I want to be doing my job at that point. I'm
Yes.
just an order taker at that point, and I don't think any agent or broker is really wants to be an order taker. We want to give options. We want to give solutions, and this is all part of being a great agent. You can't call yourself great unless you're going above and beyond, and really we have to do. We owe it to our insurers to do the right thing.
I completely agree with you about the factor of passion.
Yeah.
And, for some reason, I feel like life insurance agents who are really great at that and understand
Yes.
the personal need for life insurance would be
Yep.
great at selling flood insurance because
Yep.
they get
You're right.
that the thing that you don't ever want to imagine can and will happen to a lot of people. And it's immediately devastating. That passion is there. And I think the more time you get face to face, I have toyed around with putting some agent classes together, pre recorded that you can log in and watch. And I just can't muster up the energy to do it because I feel like it has to be a conversation. I feel like
Yep.
these kinds of topics really just need to be massaged together. And that when you figure
Yep.
out the need and understand how to push away all of that crazy stuff like 100-year zones and things that just aren't real, that we
Yep.
could really make a difference. So if you put me in front of a group of agents, I will talk as long as you like.
Firsthand is always the best because you're talking out of experience, you're talking out of your emotions, and you're a real human being. And we're all the same. We all think the same. We all feel the same. We laugh. We cry. When we purchase something, we go through the same calculations in our head, and it's important to understand the why someone didn't purchase flood insurance and the reasons behind it. And once we could find what those reasons are, then we can start finding solutions for those reasons.
The first time around was a technological fail, but we are going to get better at it, right? So
To me, the best days are kind of like the day you're having today, where your heart's beating, you're outside your comfort zone a little bit, and those are the best days. Being at the flood conference, something I dreaded after I signed up for. I was like, why did I do this? I'm so nervous. Why I didn't have to do this? Why did I do this to myself? It was so great afterwards. I was so
yes,
happy that I did do that because it really pushed me to go outside my comfort zone in front of thousands of people.
I really appreciate the time. I know that you're busy, and but I feel so much better about putting this out there. Thank you so much for the support, and
Of
we
course.
are, we've got a good episode to put out there, and we're off to the races. I'm going to cut this part out because I forgot what I was.
We'll take a little break.
I'm so chatty today. I've had a third cup of coffee, and I started very early for that. And I have a class still to go to tonight, so it's been yes. Why don't
You'll sleep well tonight, Wendy.
Yes.